Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. This week on the Expansive CEO podcast, I'm bringing you a crossover episode with Laurie Seymour of Wisdom Talk Radio. She's also the founder and CEO of the Baca Institute. And one of the special things about Laurie is that, she really helps people figure out how to have abundant ease and flow in everything that they do. So, really working with your own higher self. And from my perspective in the money world, we really take that same concept and we talk about how are we using our own gifts as visionary entrepreneurs to not only uplift ourselves and uplift our businesses and uplift our industries, but really to uplift consciousness and uplift the consciousness of money. And so in this episode, I get a little bit more into, what I see as the future of how we can use money, how we can allow money to be an expression of unconditional love and joy, rather than an expression of power, manipulation, and control. There really is an opening right now to uplift consciousness and uplift the way that we use our money in business and in life across the board. And we really dive into that in this podcast. So I would love to hear from you. This is definitely a very, a very spiritual podcast, more so than usual. So I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it makes you think. And I hope you'll reach out to me and reach out to Laurie of Wisdom Talk Radio and go like and subscribe and follow her there if this conversation resonates with you. And enjoy.
We have something special for you today. Wisdom Talk Radio and the Expansive CEO are joining forces to bring you today's episode that will actually run on both of our podcasts. So here's what we're playing with today. How do love and money vibrate in the same universe, in the same field? And we could say, how do money and consciousness coexist? What does that look like? What would that look like? How would it feel? Stay tuned to discover all that and so much more.
Thank you, Laurie, for that opening. It's such a beautiful concept. And I think it up-levels everything that we think about money currently in our world. And to introduce myself, I'm Hannah Chapman. I'm the founder of X Squared Wealth Planning and Expansive CEO. And in those capacities, I teach visionary entrepreneurs how to create and hold wealth in a way that will, impact their business, impact their lives, and impact their communities in the way that matters to their heart. And we do that not just by doing comprehensive data-driven financial planning, but by looking at how we feel, the emotions that are tied to money, the feelings that come up when an old money wound is triggered, what money stories live deep inside of us, and how, when they're expressed, how that affects our lives and our relationships. And I think there is a calling right now for us to, those of us who are conscious about how money actually vibrates at the level of unconditional love to help communicate that message and bring it more into, you know, even just normal everyday
Yeah.
situations so that we can see how it applies on the ground and
Yeah.
what that looks like and how it can change the world.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, thank you, Hannah. Well, I'm Laurie Seymour. I am host of Wisdom Talk Radio, and I am also the CEO and founder of the Baca Institute. I'm also the creator of the cutting edge quantum connection process. And that's all about discovering how activating and amplifying your quantum connection, your own quantum connection, creates a deep accessibility to your inner guidance that acts as a sustainable resource, because this is all about how do you sustain your connection. And that's what brings abundance and joy into every aspect of your life. It also allows you to take your big ideas and make them real. And so that bridge between what Hannah does in working with creative visionaries, what I do, I work with conscious business owners and visionary leaders. So it's really that same aspect of life of how do we create? How do we create and do it sustainably and with joy?
Hmm. That's the crux. That's the
Yeah.
crux right there. How do we create and sustain, right? The sustaining part with joy and with ease.
Mhm.
Um, that's where healing the money stories, I think, comes into
Mhm.
play most strongly.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, Lori, how do you see this connection showing up in your world and in your work with your clients?
Wow. How do I see that? In some ways, I see it every day in every conversation, one way or another, because if we get caught into the way that we have been trained, which, and we do get caught in it because it's the way we were trained, way we were educated, which is in that linear fashion. This plus this equals that. And boy, when you talk about money, because money is numbers, it's so easy to land in that place or to get stuck in that place when there's such an opportunity to connect into a bigger picture and into something that can sustain you. Because if you're just focused on money, and ultimately, I'm not sure if that's a very interesting conversation. If that's a very interesting place to hang out in. And I've known a lot of people like that. I remember early in my days as a psychotherapist, or I'm sure I'd been a psychotherapist at that point for some time. There was somebody that I was working with, and he would drive up either in his Rolls Royce or in his Cadillac. And that was his focus in his life. There's so much more that's possible. And that was really why he was coming to work with me. But today, as we look at, if we look at from the perspective of the field, of the quantum field, and a vibration, money has such power and potential in terms of how we create in the world, how we use our creativity.
Hmm.
And I'm sure you are finding that with everybody you're working with, because they're not just coming to you and saying, okay, let me make a good financial plan.
Hmm. Yeah, that's right. It's funny that you mention that as because it's that space of, when someone comes to me, if they just want to know about, an investment strategy,
Mhm.
how do I not lose money? How do I make the most money? It's the same. That is not an interesting conversation to me. Um, there is there is so much more around, the intention behind what we do with our money. And I feel like that's where the vibration comes in. It's what do you intend for your money and what are the intentions
Mm.
behind how you're creating wealth in the world as well, right? Because how
Yeah. So what do you mean? I'm not sure I understand intention in relationship to that.
yes, so that goes to where we as a society, as a collective, feel money vibrating right now, that's the power and the control and the influence, right?
Mm,
Money can, yes, money can be a tool for power, control, influence, addiction, those, those really low level
mhm,
vibrations
mhm,
where, you know, all that matters, is that you get the dollars. You don't care about the people, you don't care about the employees on a fundamental human level, you just
mhm,
care about the
mhm,
dollars. And we feel that as a collective. And so the potential is that money can actually vibrate so much higher. It can vibrate at that place of unconditional love, that place of
mhm,
joy, that place of courage, right? We can literally move up the scale of vibration so that when we are creating money, and this is why I work with entrepreneurs as well, because they're the ones creating more value, right?
yeah.
New innovative things in the world.
Mhm, mhm,
And when the intention behind that creation is to help others, like even just that base
mhm,
level, when the intention is to help others, to serve others, that puts you at a fully different vibrational set point,
mhm.
because the reason you're creating money is not to have influence and power and control over others. It's to serve others.
Mm.
It's
That's an interesting thing in terms of I want to say balance, and that's not quite it because I see that I've had because I've trained a lot of therapists. I've seen how people can get caught into that place of service, and there's no truth in it. It's
mm,
like, okay, I'm here to serve. And it becomes almost an ego thing where they're not filling their own bucket first. They're not feeling their into their own connection and knowing how to hold that high vibration.
mhm,
Because if we think, oh, well, yes, I'm here in service, and we give, and there's no understanding of how energy works in terms of exchange.
mhm.
And money works that is energy. Money is energy. It's we have to understand that and we have to recognize that so that we don't get into that, well, I'm here to serve these particular people, and that means that I have to not charge a lot or whatever that means, whatever the implications of that are.
Mhm.
Even if I'm tired, even if I'm not getting anything back, I'm still here to serve. And then there's a depletion. There's no sustainability in that.
Yes, and that pulls into, that martyrdom and,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
worthiness, right? Like feeling like you are not worthy to receive as much as you're willing to give.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I do like the way that you mentioned balance,
Mhm.
because you're right. There's this aspect of when you're giving, and I have a mentor who has said this as like you're either filling your bank account or your ego account. And so if you are like
Mhm.
not charging, enough that you are feeling abundant in your own finances, if you're not
Mhm.
able to sustain yourself easily, but you feel like, oh, I'm serving and I feel good doing that.
Mhm.
If you're only filling the ego account and you're not filling the bank account, then eventually you start to resent,
Mhm.
the people that you're there to serve.
Yeah.
And that's when it's like, oh, wait, something is out of whack here, because,
Mhm.
I actually don't want to talk to this person. I don't want to serve this person anymore. And
Mhm.
that wasn't the case before. So
Right.
what's wrong? What's wrong is that, or the invitation rather, is to look at how are you valuing your own services in the world,
Mm. Mhm.
so that you are also abundant and buoyant, and
Mhm.
you feel that lightness in your
Mhm.
own, and joy in your
Yeah.
own finances, because when you're creating from that space of feeling joy in your own finances, that's when right? That's when we can give abundantly. That's when we can hire people and pay them abundantly,
Mm,
and we can
mhm.
create, you know, places to serve even more, right?
Yeah. Yeah. As I listen to you, Hannah, what I'm feeling is the way in which that whole picture enhances the world.
Mhm,
Instead of, and you talked earlier about vibration, instead of having that low vibration, which is where illness comes in, which is where that mindset of this doesn't work or this can't work or I'm not good enough. And you talked about worthiness.
mhm,
So you've got that whole theme going. And those all are places where we feel constricted. We know that. We know when I start to worry, and if I start to worry about money, my whole body gets tight and I can't create. And it's not like it's an author's block, or it's simply that's the way creativity works, is that we have to be from that higher frequency, that higher vibration, and then we're tuning into all of what hasn't even happened yet, all of that whole field of potentiality from which we can create more than we knew before, more than we had before.
mhm. Yeah, this aspect of creation, that's really that's the aspect, especially with, visionary entrepreneurs, where
Mhm.
I know when we've talked before, your work in helping people tap in to their higher selves, right? That is the creative source.
Mhm.
And visionary entrepreneurs, like, sometimes they don't even know that that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
When they're like so tapped in, and they're having
Mhm.
these, like, creating something fully new in the world, and
Mhm.
whatever, I mean, there's we can't even imagine, like, think of 30 years ago, like how insane it is to, have a computer in your hand at all times,
Right.
right? Innovation is
Mhm.
always happening, and it's from that just field of creation
Mhm.
that we
Mhm.
can tap into. And what I love about how our work dovetails is that as you help people, like, tap into that more fully,
Mhm.
that creation aspect, then, when we monetize that, and
Mhm.
I'm using the word monetize because it
Yep.
is not a bad thing. This is a beautiful thing. When you
Mhm.
are providing value to others that they can then use to make their lives better too, that is the energy exchange.
Yeah.
That's
Yes,
the energy exchange.
absolutely. Absolutely. God, Hannah, that's so important. And people don't realize that. They think well, you talked about how people are who are tapped in. And I think we both work with a lot of people who are tapped in, and
Mhm,
they know it, but it's the how do you stay tapped in and use your own ability to do that, to bring things out into the world, to make
mhm,
things concrete, which includes money. And if we think that there's something wrong with the money piece of it, or there's something troublesome about it, then we won't recognize the real power of what's possible, and to bring those innovations out into the world, to make those big ideas real, um, to marry structure and strategy with your own inner guidance,
mhm,
because it's not it, I like to think of myself as that bridge, because I was a psychotherapist, I was a solutions engineer. I've always been in this realm of what's possible. But how do we do that? How do we create that bridge? And I love what you are doing with your own recognition of that for yourself, and then helping people say, "Hey, let's look at the let's look at the strategies from which we can do this
mhm,
and support this wonderful expression of yours."
mhm. Yeah, that I feel like there is again, we're talking about up-leveling all kinds of stuff today. There's an up-leveling of business as well that's happening right now and I mean, I'm seeing it just all through my network, and partially because that's, again, like you said, like that's how I'm running my business. So that's also what is coming back to me. And I'm,
Yes. Yes.
it's the beautiful law of reciprocity there, right? We are, when we tap in to our energy of what feels good, what feels good to create in our own businesses, we also are doing something that no one else is doing. And I'll give an example. So in my business, in X squared wealth planning, I realized that I was like doing money mindset coaching with my clients in a way, like with the actual implementation. So this is the piece, right? A lot of people are splitting these things apart, where here's the implementation, right? Here's the charts and graphs and data and to-do list. But then they're not looking at how do we actually make those financial decisions, what's coming up. And when I saw that, like, it was clear to me that, like, oh, we have to do both. We can't just do the money mindset and then like say, okay, go find a financial advisor that's that doesn't work. Because when you use that language of abundance and creativity and, how do we make the money rather than how do we just budget harder? There's a different language being used. This language of creativity, this language of innovation is different from what's currently typical in the financial world. So for me, when I started tapping into that and like speaking that out, that's when those clients are like, oh yeah, that's me. That's me.
You're who I want to work with.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to stop going to Starbucks. I don't want to stop, having, the things that I love in this world. And I want to just make more money, and I want to be more creative, and I want to, understand how to do all of these things together, not how to chop away.
Right.
And I think that's the potential that we're speaking to on multiple levels here. That when here's the other piece that I was going to say with that, with the clients that I work with too, when we hone in on their, like, what is it that you love? What lights you up the most? What, when you are working with a client, what are you just not even working? You're just pouring out, because that's your genius. That's what's worth the most money to your client, right? When you are like, just like able to pour out and on fire, and like your energy is just so flowing so easily. That is your gift. Not everyone does that thing that way.
Exactly. And then if you can imagine, take that then another piece or another step, which is, if I'm connected with my own inner guidance system, if I know how to ask the questions inside and get the answers, then I can even know, am I to invest in this? Is this strategy where I'm needing to go with next? Where do I put my money into this? So it's like we think of inner guidance as being kind of frou-frou out there. But for me, it's so practical. It's so practical because I can know, oh, that's not for me. And I have to have the discernment to go beyond what my ego might want to do, or what my personality gets excited by, and know how to have the discernment to say, oh, it's this. Oh, well, that's a scary thing to do. I have a client that I've been working with for a long time, and she's been creating this really incredible program for authors. And she is able to see, to use her own inner guidance connection to see, who do I need to bring onto my team?
Mhm.
What piece is important to have here? Which structure, which platform to use to teach on? And I hear you supporting that in your clients, which I just love.
Yes, yes, because um, there are different avenues to support those
Mhm,
things. But yeah, the questions, right?
mhm,
Um, the questions that we ask of ourselves, and then when someone is learning, like that's one of the things that um, I'll work with my clients on too, is asking those questions to get
mhm,
down
mhm.
to what is your intuition
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
whether we call it's so funny how some people will resonate more strongly with one or another
Right.
term, right? So your gut
And I do use
instinct.
them differently, but I understand. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, but like getting to that what you're knowing.
Yeah.
What's your knowing?
Mhm.
Um and teaching them how to, or not even teaching, like allowing them to
Mm.
trust.
Mhm, mhm.
'Cause it
Inviting that possibility.
Right, inviting, that's a beautiful way to put it. Inviting that ability to trust it. Okay,
Mhm.
what happens if we trust that knowing?
Yeah,
And then what
yeah.
happens if we trust it again and trust it again and trust it? Because it's a muscle, right? Do you find
Yeah.
that? Do you find it to be a
Mhm.
muscle?
Absolutely, and then we become our own best inner researchers. I always encourage people to do their own inner research, not just to take what I say at face value or even to take what I say. It's really to develop that capacity. We all have it, bar none. We absolutely all have that. It's how we're built, it's how we're designed as human beings. But mostly it has been trained out of us.
Ooh,
And for
okay.
those people, it's not been, that say, well, I always do that. Then I see often where people won't take action.
Mhm.
Like they'll just be so tuned in, but the next movement of that, of taking that vibration and bringing it into the physical world,
S
that's the place where it gets tricky.
Yes, so I wanted, this, like,
Go
sprang
ahead.
up really
Yes, I
strongly.
saw
Yeah,
it.
so what have you experienced? Like, how do clients override, right? So when someone
Uh,
comes to you, right? So, and they've been
mhm.
overriding or, eh, pushing down that
Mhm.
inner guidance.
Mhm.
What does that look like? Because, I mean, I have been through this and worked through this as well. My client,
Mhm.
again, helping my clients. But from your perspective, what does it look like when they come to you and they have been overriding their inner guidance for
Yeah, that's a great
most of their
question.
life?
Right. Great question. And we've all done that. That sense of, well, I had this sense, but I decided that it wasn't really right, or I doubted myself, or that didn't make sense to me. So I ignored it.
Mhm.
And
Or it didn't
then,
make sense to someone else,
well,
right?
that's
S
another way of overriding. Yeah,
Yeah,
just
letting
going to
others
someone
override.
else's influence. Yeah, but and I think it's most detrimental. Maybe that's not fair to say, when we do it to ourselves. Like ultimately, we're doing it to ourselves. We're
Mm,
saying that's not important. That's not real. And so for me, it was so much self doubt in my own life, because of all the different ways I've been raised. I mean, the why isn't even important right now, but I learned how to trust what my own inner guidance felt like. What really, we used this word in the beginning about love. I discovered what love felt like in my own body. And it had such a different feeling than self-doubt or self-criticism or overriding. And instead of the constriction that accompanies overriding, and then the kind of kicking yourself, oh yeah, I knew that and I didn't do it. Um, that feeling of flow, of feeling that unconditional love just simply within yourself, not from someone else, but simply within yourself. And that's a continuous flow. And we can interrupt it, or we can invite it and say, oh, wait a minute. I just stopped that feeling. My gut started getting tight. Maybe I'm in self-doubt. Maybe it's like the employee that you really need to fire, because it doesn't help. There's not a way of, there's no gratitude, certainly, but there's no love. So it really interrupts that high frequency of what unconditional love is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like a lot of my clients are because of the money aspect,
Mhm.
right, of what I do. So much of it comes down to, um, what makes sense. Trying to logic it, right? And
Right.
rather than the way I teach it is that, like, the brain or mind is not actually a decision-making center. Like, we don't make decisions here. We make the
Mhm.
decision is in, we feel it,
Mhm.
and then our mind can give us beautiful insights,
Absolutely.
right? Like,
Absolutely.
it's there for a reason.
Mhm.
But it's not, if we have, exactly to your point, if we have that, like, feeling inside, say
Mhm.
it's an employee, that's a perfect situation, an employee that's just not working out, and you
Mhm.
have the knowing that it's not going to work out.
Mhm.
We need to part ways, but your mind starts to fill in the blank. They're
Mhm.
going to be mad. They need this job for their family. They start to, like, okay, yes, those might be things that will happen, right? But it's,
Mhm. Mhm.
if you have a knowing, if you have a deep knowing that this is not a good fit, then that's the invitation there, is to explore how that's true. And that
Mhm.
if you let that employee go, if it's not a good fit where you are, they are also not being served well by that
Mhm.
job. And
Right.
letting them
Right.
go allows them to find the place where they fit, learn the
Mhm.
lessons that
Mhm.
they are meant to learn,
Right.
right?
Right.
And when we're talking, I want to make a point here, because there are some big companies making huge layoffs,
Right.
in
That's a
the
different
economy.
thing. Yeah.
Exactly. We are not talking about Zoom laying off 1,300 employees, that kind of thing.
Mhm.
Um, this is working with smaller business owners,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
when we are the ones making these decisions, and we know each of the people around us so closely,
Mhm. Mhm.
there is a different set of decision making that
Yeah.
goes into something
Yeah.
like that.
And from the other side of it, even as an employee, yeah, because I've been within teams within a large organization, and to know when there needs to be a shift, when that doesn't work for whatever reason.
Mhm.
And I remember working when I was doing some severance consulting with companies, and I worked would work with employees who had been given their notice, and part of the package was they got to work with me. But be able to help them see, what is it that is really happening here? What is the potential? What's the possibility? Because then we start to get creative. When we move out of the fear, when we move into, okay, I am more than this job. I am more than my fear. And what is it that really wants to move in me towards creation,
Mhm.
towards manifesting into the world in a different way? And maybe that's a different job in a different field. Maybe that's the same field. Maybe it's going off as an entrepreneur, and making that kind of transition. But whatever it is, we have to keep moving. In other words, we can't stay static, or we start to, there's this self-destructive kind of part that happens, or process that happens. So if change is the currency, how are we going to do that in a graceful way? How are we going to do that in a resourced way?
Mm,
And that's what I hope we're both bringing to this conversation is how can you be sourced to be part of this exploration of what's possible?
mm. Oh, yeah. Yes. And that's when we talk about money as unconditional love, when we talk about
Mhm,
money as vibrating at that higher level, that
mhm,
is another aspect of it as well. It's so
mhm.
it's interesting that brought the conversation back here because there's an aspect of when we hold on to money, it can either
Mhm,
feel like hoarding, right?
mhm.
It can feel like like it has to be here or I'm not safe.
Yeah, yeah.
So there it can have that energy,
Mhm,
or it can have the energy of being a beautiful source of stability and
mhm,
launch pad.
mm,
And it's the same thing, right? It's the same. It's having reserves in
mhm,
place
mhm,
can
mhm,
either feel again like a launching point, or it can feel like I can't my accounts can't go below
mhm,
X amount
mhm.
of dollars or I'm going to freak out, right?
Right, right.
Or,
And that's a good way for things to just stop cold.
right.
If change is a constant, and we know that it is, our body is constantly renewing itself. Our, 7 trillion cells, some portion are dying and being reborn every single day. So if
Mhm,
that's the constant, then, and everything is energy, I'm going to put that one in there too.
mhm,
Then we have to be attuned to that and see, how am I needing to change today? What is changing today, and how am I to be part of it?
mhm.
And that means that money gets to be in circulation. I have a
Yeah.
good friend who has always said, money hasn't left the planet,
Yeah.
and it's there. So how are we interacting with that? And I know I said this to you when we talked earlier, that a dear teacher of mine would always say that, in the metaphysical, that love is the highest frequency, and that in the physical it's money, and that money has inherent in it a high vibration because it has to do with creation, it has to do with impact. And how are we going to relate to that? And with that, how are we going to relate with that so that we bring that into our consciousness, into whatever it is that we do create, whatever business, whatever project, whatever relationship, because it impacts everything.
Yes. And I just had a hit of, if people are listening and wondering, what if I don't feel like I have what
Mhm.
I need around me. Like, what are you
Mhm.
saying? Why, I don't feel like money is love. I don't feel that.
Mhm.
That's the that's the invitation
Mhm.
to look at that relationship.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
believe that money, our relationship to money, is actually one of the primary relationships in our lives.
Mm.
Just like our partners, just like our children,
Mhm.
just like, those primary relationships that we have as
Yeah.
humans, money is
Yeah.
actually one of those relationships.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah. So,
we
what is your relationship to love?
right. Yes. And so exactly, exactly. So if these things are tied inexplicably,
Mhm.
which they are, if you are feeling like it's not true, it doesn't feel good, like
Mhm.
I don't like this conversation because I don't resonate with that aspect,
Mhm.
that's that's the money story. That is the money story coming up.
Mhm. So
To
how do you engage in that with someone?
It's a very tender exploration.
Mm.
I'll just, to be like absolutely honest, this is one of the one of the places where we hold those feelings of, I think we talked about this, like unworthiness
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
doubt, self-doubt,
Mhm.
where you aren't loving yourself fully.
Mhm. Mhm.
A lot of that shows up in our money stories
Yeah.
and in our very early childhood relationship to money.
Mhm.
Did we feel like we were able to ask for whatever we wanted? Did we feel like we had abundant
Mhm.
resources for all of our needs? Was
Yeah.
there was there literally enough food in the house?
Mhm.
Were
Mhm.
your parents able to care for you and provide for you, or was it they had to provide for you so they couldn't care for you, right? Like we
Mm.
have
Mm.
the story gets down to worthiness almost all the time, but how it
Mhm.
shows up or how it came about is different for every person.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there has to be a very tender exploration of
Mm.
what was that? What were those early memories of money? What were
Mhm.
those early experiences of money? And then how did that show up in your teen years, in your 20s, in your 30s,
Mhm.
in your 40s? How, like we have these imprints that then um, the pattern just keeps repeating
Yeah.
until
Yeah.
you see it and interrupt it, right?
Yeah.
Become aware of it
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
love it back into wholeness is
Mm.
is the process that I go through
Mhm. Mhm.
um, with my clients, and in the context of, like this matters for how much you're willing to put yourself out there. How visible are you
Mm.
willing to be for your business? How much, how are you going to charge for your
Mhm.
work in the world? Like all of that is tied back to the money
Totally.
stories.
Totally. Totally. And that love and money story is absolutely intertwined. Just thinking about how I grew up, and my father died when I was very young. My mother had 4 kids. She didn't have any resources to fall back on. And and what I see in her health journey through her life, that she didn't feel loved. She didn't know love. She wasn't able to just to feel that love in herself. And then therefore, that didn't come across to those in her life, like her kids. And so money as the struggle or struggle as life was
Mhm.
inherent in every part of that.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the other piece of the puzzle here is that when you heal one, like it's a
Mhm.
channel into healing that same wound. It's like we can,
Absolutely.
right, we,
Absolutely.
we can like come at it from these different angles,
Yeah.
and it all ties back to that
It
worthiness.
does. It does. Yeah. And I don't think we have to do a lot of excavation around it, because as we tune into, for me, the work is really because I do the work in a lot in energy. It's around shifting that energy frequency so that
Mhm,
that love is what shows up. That love is what you are aware of. That's part of the universal fabric.
mhm,
And it's just simply the way that we have kept ourselves walled off from it. And so as that love shifts, so does the money, so does the worthiness, so does, all the different things that you've just painted such a beautiful picture of, the interwoven nature of them all.
mhm. Yeah, and I'm gonna say a shortcut, but it is kind of a shortcut,
But it is kind of
right?
a shortcut. Yeah. Yeah, it is. Because I used to be a therapist, I want to say loud and clearly, we don't need to spend our whole lives healing.
Mhm,
We can interrupt that. We can allow the love in. And yes, it may be a little bit of learning of that or of activation of that. But as we do that and as we keep doing that, 'cause it's not a one and done, we don't have to focus on the healing, so to speak. That's my stance on it.
mhm.
We have to work on the allowing and the trusting and the noticing. Yeah.
Yeah, yes, I agree with that because and I've been through. this myself too, like feeling like, oh, how am I ever going to be fully healed, right? If it's not working, then
Mm-hmm.
there's something still wrong with me. There's something still to
Right.
heal,
Right.
rather than accepting that there always will be something, right? Like something new will come.
Something to discover.
Right? There's always new things to discover, and we can be in a
Mhm.
place of loving, accepting, allowance, be a receiver,
Receiver.
while, yes, yeah, something is going to come up and you'll heal that too.
Yeah. It's like,
And you can be
oops.
in receipt.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. I love that you use the word receiving, and maybe that's a good place for us because I think we could probably talk for
I
hours,
think so.
but maybe that's a place to wrap around as we complete the whole energy of receiving, of allowing yourself to receive, of and if when I think about that, when I experience that energetically, then what's happening is that is happening energetically. It's happening vibrationally. And so I don't have to put a lot of details around that or even structure. But what I notice is that, oh, things start, how did that happen? How did this gift come my way?
Mhm,
And it's different than thinking we have to put a linear process into place that ultimately doesn't touch it anyway.
mhm. Agreed.
Mm.
So, Lori, how can people find you and get a hold of you?
At the best place is at the bacainstitute.com. There's a wonderful quantum connection quiz there you can take, and you can find out your own way, your own style of connecting with what I call the quantum field, and lots of wonderful things to be resourced with throughout the whole uh, website.
And
And of
that's
course, I'm on LinkedIn and, all those Facebook. And it's the Baca, BACA, the BacaInstitute.com.
perfect. That's what I was just
Yeah.
gonna spell it so people know how to spell it.
Yes. And as a podcast host, I do the same. So how do people find you, Hannah?
Yeah, so I am also on LinkedIn, Hannah R. Chapman. That's Chapman with a P, Chapman.
Mhm.
LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all that. And you can find me on expansiveceo.com. That's
Mm.
my coaching and money mindset side of my business. I have a beautiful free gift that you can download at expansiveceo.com/free gift. It's called Get Your Time Back and Thrive. It's a little mini course
Mm.
that I
Mm.
that I created. And at X Squared Wealth Planning is my financial advisory firm. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So,
Wonderful.
yeah,
Wonderful.
it was
Wow.
it
What
was
a
so,
time.
yes, so wonderful to have this conversation. I'm so excited to
Mhm.
put it out on both platforms and just have our
Absolutely.
have our audiences. They're so synergistic.
Mhm.
Come together. Thank you for
Yes.
this
Yes.
conversation, Lori.
You are so welcome, Hannah, and thank you. And I want to thank our listeners, our viewers, for being with us today here at Wisdom Talk Radio and The Expansive CEO. And remind you to join us here regularly on both platforms for more wisdom, discovery, and illumination. You can always find us. I know your podcast is everywhere. So is Wisdom Talk Radio. So you can go to any of your favorite places to listen to podcasts. And we would love it if you would leave us a review. Because
Mhm.
when you leave us a review, that helps other people find us. It helps people access this kind of wisdom. And it helps this kind of transformation of the world, which is, I think, what we're both after, one way or another, Hannah.
Yes, absolutely. I could not
Yeah.
agree more. So
Yeah. Great.
thank you, Lori.
Thank you, Hannah.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening, and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, You can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough. You are enough. And your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.